There's a place in California where time moves differently. A place where men wait decades to die, and others find their first taste of freedom. This isn't just another prison. It's a mirror of America's soul. Before we begin, make sure to like this video and subscribe. Your support helps us keep telling stories the world tries to forget. Now, let's step inside the walls of San Quentin State Prison, where hope and death walk side by side. San Quentin wasn't built for mercy. When the first stones were laid in 1852, California was still finding its place in the young United States. Gold rush fever had filled the state with dreamers, drifters, and thieves. The new government wanted order and punishment. They found both on a lonely stretch of land north of San Francisco Bay. Back then, there were no concrete walls or gun towers. Just wooden fences, crude cells, and guards who were barely trained. The prison started on ships, literally. Before the land facility existed, inmates were kept aboard old vessels anchored in the bay. They called them prison hulks. Dark, damp, and crawling with disease. Those floating cells became the prototype for what San Quentin would soon become on land, a fortress of confinement. By 1854, the prison moved ashore. The name came from a Native American chief, Quentin, whose people once lived on that land. But the irony was cruel. The place that carried his name would become a monument to captivity. Early San Quentin was brutal. Whips cracked daily. Guards carried rifles and batons. Inmates worked in chain gangs, hauling rock under the hot sun. There was no rehabilitation, no therapy, no education, only survival. Food was spoiled. Cells were overcrowded. Disease spread like wildfire. In those days, death was common and mercy was rare. But the prison grew. By the late 1800s, it had become a small city behind walls, complete with factories, workshops, and a gallows. Executions were public, almost theatrical. Crowds gathered outside to hear the church bells toll, one ring for every man hanged. Each sound echoed through the bay, a grim reminder of justice served the old-fashioned way. San Quentin wasn't just a prison, it was a message. A message to criminals that California would not forgive. And yet, as decades passed, that message began to change. Reformers started asking questions. Was punishment enough? Could men be changed? Or was San Quentin destined to destroy every soul that entered? By the early 1900s, California's justice system was torn between two worlds, one demanding harsher discipline, the other calling for humanity. San Quentin stood right in the middle, a stage for that battle. One side saw inmates as monsters, the other as men who'd lost their way. The tension grew as thousands poured in, bank robbers, killers, gangsters, political radicals. Some became legends, others vanished into the dark. And hovering above them all was a new symbol of fear, death row. The place where California's most dangerous men would wait for execution, sometimes for years, sometimes for life. In 1893, the prison built its first permanent gallows on the lower yard. But it wasn't until the early 1900s that executions became routine. Hangings were slow, often botched. Some took minutes to die. Others took longer. By 1938, the state wanted something cleaner, something modern. So they brought in the gas chamber. That chamber became infamous. Made of green metal and glass, it looked like a science experiment gone wrong. Inside, inmates were strapped to a steel chair as cyanide pellets dropped into acid beneath their feet. It was supposed to be painless. It rarely was. Over the next half-century, more than 190 men and women would die inside that room. Yet, beyond the horror, San Quentin also carried something unexpected: life. Because while one part of the prison executed people, another part began trying to save them. New wardens introduced education. Some inmates learned to read for the first time. Others discovered art, writing, or music. A few even earned college degrees behind bars. By the 1940s, the world outside was changing fast. The Great Depression had ended, World War II was reshaping society, and San Quentin found itself at a crossroads. Would it remain a relic of punishment, or evolve into a place of reform? That question would define the next 100 years. And as riots, rebellions, and reform movements erupted, San Quentin became a reflection of America itself, torn between justice and mercy, control and compassion. But the story was far from over. The next decades would bring music, journalism, murder, and redemption, all within the same cold walls. San Quentin isn't just a prison. It's a world, a city inside the walls. A place where more than 3,000 men live under one rule, the state of California. And at its heart lies the most feared address in America, California's death row. For over a century, every man sentenced to die in California has ended up here. More than 700 inmates have called death row home. Some wait decades. Others die before their sentences are ever carried out. Each cell measures 4 feet wide, 10 feet long with a narrow bed, a sink and a toilet. That's it. No freedom. No privacy. Just time, endless silent time. The corridor echoes with voices, distant radios and the shuffle of chained feet. Inmates pass notes called kites, sliding them under doors with strings made from sheets. It's their way of speaking through steel. Hope travels and whispers here. But beyond those rows of cells, San Quentin runs like a small, locked-in society. It has its own rules, its own rhythm. There are kitchens, workshops, classrooms, even a hospital. Inmates wake at dawn. They work jobs, attend programs, or spend the day in the yard, a large concrete field surrounded by towers and razor wire. The yard is where everything happens: friendships, fights, deals, and dreams. In the 1960s, the world outside began to shake. Civil rights, anti-war protests, political assassinations. America was changing fast. Inside San Quentin, that energy ignited too. New ideas reached the prison through books, letters, and visitors. Inmates began questioning authority, speaking out about injustice, and organizing for better treatment. That's when George Jackson appeared. Convicted of armed robbery at 18, he arrived at San Quentin and became one of its most influential inmates. While behind bars, he studied Marx, Mao, and revolutionary theory. His writings, especially Soledad Brother, turned him into a national figure. He described prison as a reflection of the society that created it, and his words reached far beyond the walls. But Jackson's story ended violently. In 1971, a failed escape attempt led to a bloody shootout inside San Quentin. Jackson was killed, along with 3 correctional officers and 2 inmates. The event triggered lockdowns and fear across the entire California prison system. For years, it became a symbol of the tension between power and rebellion, the system versus the soul. After that, the mood inside changed. Security tightened. Reform slowed. The prison became harder, colder, more controlled. But not everything turned dark. Because while one part of San Quentin sank into isolation, another part began to create. In the 1980s, a small group of inmates started a project that would change the way people saw prisoners forever. A newspaper called the San Quentin News. It was written, edited, and published entirely by inmates. The paper covered life behind bars. The violence, yes, but also the art, education, and acts of humanity often ignored by the outside world. That publication still exists today. It's one of the only inmate-run newspapers in the United States, read by both prisoners and free citizens. Its stories remind readers that even in the darkest places, truth and hope can still find ink. Music also found a way in. Inmates built makeshift bands, sang blues, gospel, and rock. One of those concerts became legendary. Johnny Cash at San Quentin, recorded live in 1969. Cash stood on stage, guitar in hand, facing hundreds of men in blue prison uniforms. When he sang "I Walk the Line," the crowd erupted, not out of rebellion but recognition. He was singing to men who had crossed the line and were now paying for it. That performance turned San Quentin into a cultural icon. Millions heard the album. Few forgot its message, that even the condemned still had a heartbeat. But beyond music and headlines, life inside remained unpredictable. Riots broke out in the yard. Gang wars simmered under the surface. Guards were attacked. Inmates were stabbed. And yet, alongside all that chaos, programs of healing quietly grew. Therapy sessions, religious groups, education programs, and even podcasts like Ear Hustle, which today share stories directly from inside the prison. San Quentin became a paradox. A place of death, but also a birthplace for second chances. It showed that even behind razor wire, men could still change, still learn, still matter. The decades rolled on and California's justice system faced a new question. What happens when punishment lasts too long? When the walls meant to protect society start to break the people inside them? The answers, and the fights that followed, would shape San Quentin's most transformative era yet. Because the next chapter isn't just about violence or survival. It's about reform, redemption, and the slow, painful evolution of America's oldest prison. San Quentin is a name that carries weight. For decades it meant fear. It meant finality. But by the 1990s, a quiet transformation began to take root behind those same iron gates. Not through politicians. Not through wardens. But through the inmates themselves. Change came slowly, one conversation at a time. The violence never vanished, but something deeper started growing, a hunger for meaning. Men who had once lived by the code of survival began looking for redemption. At first, it started with education. Volunteers from the Bay Area drove across the Golden Gate Bridge each week, bringing books, notebooks, and a belief that even the forgotten deserved a voice. They came from UC Berkeley, Stanford, and local churches. And they taught courses in literature, sociology, journalism, and creative writing. Soon those classes became lifelines. For many inmates, it was their first time reading a full novel, writing an essay, or standing in front of a classroom to speak their truth. Then came something revolutionary, the Prison University Project, later renamed Mount Tamalpais College. It offered real, accredited college degrees to men serving time inside San Quentin. By 2016, hundreds had graduated. Some went on to mentor others, proving that intelligence could grow even in the harshest soil. Meanwhile, art programs flourished. Painters filled canvases with stories of regret and rebirth. Poets wrote about loss, addiction, and forgiveness. Actors performed Shakespeare in the yard, blending centuries-old words with modern pain. It was strange, powerful, and deeply human. San Quentin was starting to sound less like a prison, and more like a campus locked behind bars. Outside the walls, something else was changing too. Public opinion about mass incarceration began to shift. People were questioning the system that had once promised safety but delivered overcrowding and despair. California's prisons were bursting at the seams, and taxpayers were paying billions each year. Reform advocates pointed to San Quentin as both a problem and a possible solution. That's when a new kind of storytelling took hold, voices from the inside reaching out. In 2017, two men, Earlyn Woods and Antoine Banks Williams, started a podcast called Ear Hustle. It was the first podcast ever created and produced inside a U.S. prison. The show shared real stories of daily life behind bars: friendship, survival, regret, love, and hope. No filters. No scripts. Just honesty. Within months, it became a global hit, downloaded millions of times, even nominated for major awards. Listeners around the world realized something profound. Prisoners weren't just numbers. They were human beings capable of change, humor, and reflection. For the first time in decades, San Quentin wasn't just seen as a place of punishment. It was a place of stories, and those stories were rewriting its legacy. But transformation didn't come without resistance. Many still believed that rehabilitation was naive, that criminals deserved only isolation. The debate grew heated in the 2000s as California reinstated and then paused the death penalty multiple times. Hundreds of men remained on death row, waiting for a justice system that moved slower than time itself. In 2019, Governor Gavin Newsom signed an executive order halting executions in California. The gas chamber at San Quentin was dismantled, and the death row units began to empty. It was the end of an era, at least for now. The prison that had once been known for death was now being redesigned around life. Still, the contrast inside the walls remained sharp. One side held men working toward degrees, podcasts, and art. The other still held men serving life without parole, haunted by crimes they could never undo. Every day they walked the same yard, breathed the same air, and looked out at the same razor-sharp horizon. For some, that was freedom enough. For others, it was a daily reminder of what they had lost. Yet, in that balance between hope and despair, San Quentin found its modern identity. It became a laboratory for what America's prisons could be, not just cages of punishment but communities of transformation. Visitors from around the world now tour the facility. They meet inmates who tutor others, write for newspapers, and organize charity runs inside the yard. Celebrities, journalists, and reformers all come to listen. And while the gates still clang shut behind them, they leave changed, realizing that redemption, like punishment, is a choice society has to make. In 2022, the state announced a bold plan to reimagine San Quentin entirely. The prison would shift its focus from retribution to rehabilitation. New facilities, new training centers, and new opportunities were promised, aiming to make San Quentin a center for innovation in criminal justice reform. It was a radical idea. To turn the oldest, hardest prison in California into a model for healing. But even as those plans move forward, one truth remains. San Quentin's legacy isn't built on walls or laws. It's built on stories. Stories of men who fell, fought, and tried to rise again. Stories that prove that even in a place born for death, life refuses to be silenced. Every morning at San Quentin starts the same. The buzz of a steel door. The echo of boots on concrete. The count. Every inmate must stand, silent, motionless, as officers walk past with clipboards in hand. Even after decades, that sound, the heavy door sliding shut, still feels final. By sunrise, the yard begins to stir. Men in blue file out for breakfast, their trays clattering under fluorescent light. Some sit alone, lost in thought. Others laugh quietly with cellmates, trying to hold on to something normal in a world that forgot them long ago. The air smells of damp concrete and burnt coffee. Every sound bounces off stone. Even whispers carry. It's a place where privacy doesn't exist, and every movement is watched, recorded, remembered. Yet amid the tension, small pockets of peace appear. You'll find a man kneeling in prayer near the chapel. Another sketching portraits in pencil, his drawings traded for instant coffee or soap. A few gather around chessboards, the pieces carved from cardboard and toothpaste caps. Each move, a strategy for sanity. Life in San Quentin runs on discipline. Wake up. Or lock down. Repeat. But within that monotony, transformation quietly brews. Inside the education center, men who once dropped out of school now write essays on philosophy and politics. Others study math, learning fractions beside men serving life. The teachers, volunteers and former inmates, speak softly but carry power. They remind their students that knowledge can't be locked up. In the media center, microphones hang above scratched desks. This is where the Ear Hustle team records its episodes. They talk about cell etiquette, family visits, hope and heartbreak. No sensationalism. No script. Just truth. Listeners outside often write letters back, sometimes saying the podcast changed the way they see prisoners forever. Across the yard, the Prison Arts Project gives men brushes and paint. Walls once bare now hold murals of eagles, sunsets and faces long gone. Some paintings leave the prison, sold through exhibitions to raise funds for victims' programs. Art, once forbidden, has become a bridge, connecting two worlds that rarely meet. But even in this fragile peace, the reality of confinement never fades. A siren cuts through the yard. Everyone drops to the ground. A fight broke out. Guards rush in, batons drawn. Then silence. Moments like that remind everyone, no matter how reformed they become, San Quentin can turn violent in seconds. Still, for many, the struggle isn't physical anymore. It's emotional. It's the weight of time, years, decades, pressing down on the mind. Some inmates have outlived their families. Others never receive mail. One man once said, "Out there time flies. In here it drags its feet." That slow drag becomes the real sentence. Mental health programs try to ease that burden. Therapists, counselors, and peer groups meet weekly. They talk about guilt, anger, addiction, and forgiveness. It's not easy. Vulnerability inside a maximum security prison can feel like weakness. But for some, those sessions are the first time they've ever truly spoken about their pain. Evenings are quiet, almost sacred. The sun dips behind the Marin Hills, casting gold light over the razor wire. From afar it looks peaceful, almost beautiful. But inside, men prepare for another count, another lock-in, another night. The clang of steel marks the end of the day. Lights out means reflection, or nightmares. For some, dreams are the only escape. For others, they're the hardest part. Because no dream lasts when the door slams shut again at dawn. Still, hope clings to the cracks in the walls. You can hear it in laughter echoing down the tier. You can see it in letters that start with "Dear Mom." You can feel it in every man trying, against all odds, to rewrite his story. San Quentin isn't just a prison anymore. It's a mirror. A reflection of what happens when punishment meets possibility. A living experiment in whether humanity can survive confinement. And while some may never leave its gates, their words, their art, and their voices already have. They travel beyond the walls, reminding the world that even inside a place built for despair, hope refuses to die. For more than a century, San Quentin has been a symbol of America's hardest truths. Built for punishment, feared for death, reborn through art, education, and resistance. But now, for the first time in history, the state of California is trying to turn it into something else, a place of healing. In 2023, Governor Gavin Newsom made an announcement that shocked the nation. San Quentin, he said, would no longer be known as a maximum security prison. It would become the San Quentin Rehabilitation Center, the first of its kind in the United States. The idea wasn't just about new walls or paint. It was about rebuilding the system from the inside out. The focus would shift from punishment to preparation, preparing men for the lives waiting beyond the gate. For the first time, rehabilitation would be the mission, not the exception. The plan drew inspiration from Norway's prison model, famous for its humane approach. Their correctional officers are trained like social workers, and inmates live in small, community-style units. They cook their own food. They study. They learn trades. The goal is simple, to create neighbors, not monsters. California wanted to try the same, but inside its most infamous prison. Architects, psychologists, and former inmates joined a design committee called the San Quentin Transformation Advisory Council. They walked through the old cell blocks, studying every shadow and sound. They listened to inmates, staff, and reformers. And together they began to imagine something radical. A prison where punishment no longer defines the person. The new design includes open classrooms, therapy wings, reentry training centers, and even digital learning labs. Old cell blocks will be replaced with modern housing units, smaller, brighter, safer. The goal is to teach responsibility, not fear. To replace the clang of chains with the hum of classrooms. Critics called it naive. They said the men inside didn't deserve luxury. But supporters fired back. What's the point of punishment if no one ever changes? Every year, thousands of inmates eventually return to society. Rehabilitation doesn't just help them, it protects everyone. Behind those statistics are real stories. Men who learned coding inside prison now teach others. Former lifers who once ran gangs now mentor younger inmates, helping them avoid the same path. Programs like Coding 7370 First Watch and Guiding Rage into Power have turned violent offenders into developers, filmmakers, and counselors. San Quentin has become a testing ground for what's possible when you bet on humanity. But this new era isn't easy. The ghosts of the past still linger. Death row remains part of San Quentin's legacy. Even as executions are halted, hundreds still wait for final decisions. Some victims' families fear that focusing on rehabilitation forgets the pain left behind. The debate cuts deep because both sides carry truth. And that's what makes San Quentin so complex. It's not a story of good or evil, it's a story of growth. The same place that once held the gas chamber now holds computer labs. The same yard where riots broke out now hosts graduation ceremonies. The same cells that once silenced men now echo with podcasts and poetry. Transformation at San Quentin isn't about rewriting history. It's about owning it. It's about proving that redemption doesn't erase accountability, it gives it meaning. Today, reformers call San Quentin the lab for the future of incarceration. Visitors walk its grounds and see something they never expected. Hope. Not naive hope, but earned hope. The kind built from sweat, struggle, and second chances. Every man inside is still paying for his choices. But now he's also learning how to make better ones. And that may be San Quentin's greatest evolution, turning pain into purpose and punishment into possibility. When the gates open each morning, sunlight spills across the yard. It shines on murals, classrooms, and faces both young and old. It shines on men who may never leave, and those who will walk free one day. That same light touches the guard towers, the barbed wire, and the chapel roof. A reminder that even in the darkest places, there is still something worth saving. San Quentin's story isn't over. It's just turning a page. From a prison of death to a campus of life. From America's shame to its second chance. And if the experiment succeeds, maybe one day it won't just change a prison. It'll change the meaning of justice itself. Behind every wall there's a story. And inside San Quentin, those stories have faces. They belong to men who've done terrible things, and somehow learned to do better. They belong to officers who've stopped seeing inmates as numbers. And to volunteers who keep coming back week after week because they believe change is real. Take Curtis Wall Street Carroll. He entered San Quentin at 17, unable to read or write. Years later, he discovered the stock market through a discarded newspaper. He taught himself finance, literacy, and discipline, inside a cell. Today he teaches other inmates about money management and decision-making. He calls it freedom within. To him, investing isn't just about wealth, it's about self-worth. Then there's Earlonne Woods, the co-founder of Ear Hustle. He served over 20 years but never lost his voice. Through stories he showed the world what life behind bars truly sounds like. In 2018, his sentence was commuted for extraordinary rehabilitation. Now free, he still returns to San Quentin, to record, to teach, to remind others that their stories matter. Another name echoes through the prison's chapel, Rahsaan New York Thomas. A writer, a mentor, and an editor for San Quentin News. His words reached national audiences, challenging stereotypes about crime and punishment. He once said, "We can't change our past, but we can change our purpose." That line became a motto inside the yard. These men aren't exceptions, they're proof. Proof that transformation isn't a miracle. It's work. Daily work. It's staying out of trouble, showing up to class, making peace instead of noise. In a place designed to break spirits, they built something unbreakable: community. Even among the staff, something has shifted. Correctional officers now attend empathy training. Many have seen inmates they once guarded become educators or coders. One officer said in an interview, "When they grow, we grow too. The walls don't divide as much as they used to. And beyond the walls, the public has started to listen." Celebrities, journalists, and reformers tour San Quentin to see this transformation firsthand. Some leave in tears. Some leave inspired. Because no matter how hard you try, it's impossible to walk those halls and not feel the weight of history and the fragile light of change. The yard that once echoed with riots now hosts graduations, poetry readings, even TED Talks. Laughter mixes with footsteps. Pride replaces shame. It's not perfect, but it's progress. Each day, men line up for roll call, knowing tomorrow isn't promised. But they keep learning, creating, and helping others. Because for the first time in a long time, San Quentin isn't just where their lives end. It's where they begin again. San Quentin has stood for over 170 years. It has seen pain, death, riots, music, and miracles. It has been both a symbol of punishment and a classroom for redemption. Its story is America's story, a struggle between justice and mercy. From the gallows to the gas chamber. From Johnny Cash's guitar to Ear Hustle's microphone. From silence to storytelling. From hopelessness to healing. Every generation has left a mark on these walls. And now, the next one is trying to turn them into something better. Not by erasing the past, but by learning from it. Some call it foolish. Some call it brave. But maybe it's both. Because believing in redemption always requires courage. So, the next time you hear the name San Quentin, don't just think of death row. Think of classrooms. Think of voices. Think of second chances written in ink, sound, and sweat. Because behind every locked door, there's still a human story, waiting to be heard. And that's what keeps hope alive. Before we end, remember, your support helps us share the real stories, the hidden truths, and the voices that deserve to be heard. So hit that like button, subscribe, and share this video. Because somewhere, a story like this might just change a life. San Quentin. A prison. A promise. A mirror of who we are, and who we still can become.